Hey guys, it's Yardo here, and welcome to the first episode of my newest series, Cringe Buzzwords. You like that little inflection there? I'm phrasing this series as a question because I want it to be less of a video essay and more of a discovery. Jump scare! Sorry, I just gained like 15 pounds and 6 inches of hair. Quick disclaimer before we get into this video, I wrote the full script and made most of this video like 7 months ago, but since then, I've had some really bad autoimmune flare-ups that made it difficult for me to finish this video in a timely manner, so you will be seeing some jarring cuts throughout the video of me getting fatter and hairier, I guess. So I apologize there, but yeah, with H3H3's video coming out and Trump's subsequent vow to take over Gaza.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it too. We'll own it.
I thought it would be important to finally get this video out. And as you can see, this is going to be a long one. And I want everyone to know that I'd love to read your opinions in the comments, but if you don't watch the whole video before commenting, you might end up looking pretty silly to the people that did, because there's a good chance that I address your concern in this video. My entire goal with this channel is to incite conversation, learn from one another, and combat cognitive dissonance both in myself and my audience. Along with my personal experience from all the research I did on this video, it's clear to me that respectful, open communication is the #1 thing that could have prevented many of the conflicts we'll be talking about in this video. I would love to see some thoughtful debate here, but if you're just going to be throwing around buzzwords, then you definitely missed the point of the video. And hopefully this doesn't turn into the content nuke comment section where a bunch of leftists just say, "Oh, this is cringe. Everything is so wrong about this video. I don't have the time or the obligation to educate you on a video made based off of such toxic fundamentals." You know, without giving any actual criticism of the video or giving any examples of what was wrong with the video, just saying that it's completely wrong and you should trust me because I'm a leftist, I'm smart. And the ironic part is that I kind of consider myself to be a leftist to a certain extent, but I don't know, it just feels so difficult to find people on the internet that have a balanced take that actually care about learning from different sources. So I hope that if any of this resonates, sorry for hitting that, but I hope that if any of this resonates with you, you feel a little bit less alone in your intellectual journey. Anyway, enjoy the video and the comment section, but if you say anything blatantly racist or hateful, I'll be reporting your comments. Free speech, not hate speech here. And no, that does not mean that I will report your comments that call me out or prove me wrong. I'm not Elon Musk. But yeah, back to the past. In this series, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the etymology and social connotations of popular words that I suspect are being bastardized. And I know that even just choosing one of these words is already proof that I'm biased against that word. But throughout the research process, I hope that we can dig deep and really figure out if a word's contemporary meaning is justifiable. I mean, is the word cringe? Is the word even a buzzword? Let's find out together. Well, first off, what is a buzzword? According to Oxford Languages, a buzzword is a word or phrase, often an item of jargon, that is fashionable at a particular time or in a particular context. If you really think about it, buzzword itself is a buzzword, as is the word cringe.
Who knew the world was capable of such oxymoronic, paradoxical juxtapositions?
But I guess we're not meta enough to do an episode on our show's namesake just yet, so let's start with something antiquated and irrelevant, like the Israel-Palestine conflict.
Ugly scenes at UCLA as pro-Palestinian protesters and their opponents engage in violent clashes.
They're not letting students in based on their ethnicity.
The young woman, described as Jewish, was found beaten unconscious on the UCLA campus.
Just kidding. I mean, kidding about it being irrelevant. I'm not kidding about this episode revolving around the Israel-Palestine conflict. You know, you just got to get the hard stuff out of the way. Kind of like back when we were kids, our parents would just throw us naked into some bathtub with some random kid because they had chicken pox and they wanted you to contract chicken pox, you know, so you wouldn't get it late in life. Now that I think about that, that was like really weird. Like, why didn't they just give us a pox-infected blanket like our good old-fashioned red, white, and blue-blooded American colonial ancestors, which is a perfect segue into today's buzzword, colonizer. This is a word that, in my humble opinion, has been overused in leftist circles for decades. And for anyone who's made the devastating mistake of entering any social media platform since October of 2023, you'll be hard-pressed to avoid this word. And mostly this is because pretty much every comment section, no matter what the post is about, turns into a microcosm of the war in the Middle East. Now, let's say you're enjoying your Sunday afternoon and scrolling through Instagram, looking at some cupcake recipes, and you see a really good one. And it's just this photo of this guy who happens to be a flamboyantly gay guy that has some really good looking cupcakes. You scroll down into the comment section, and the first thing you see is,
excuse me, but why haven't you mentioned Palestine?
And then you keep scrolling, and you see that somebody responded to that guy and said,
well, have you seen this guy? This guy would be
pushed off a building
if he ever stepped foot in Gaza.
You get the picture. And as these arguments devolve, there's a slew of charged words that are thrown between both sides. You know, some that come to mind are terrorist, regime, Zionist, occupation, and finally, colonizer. And as you might have noticed, I use the word charged words because I'm not going to say that colonizer is a buzzword without us having a conversation about it. Well, that would be if it wasn't so obvious. Like, this is a word that is so commonly used all the time now. So with other episodes in the future, we'll try to choose ones that are a little bit more questionable. But colonizer is a buzzword for sure. But that leaves the main question here. Is it cringe though?
Cringe is the ultimate evil. It's the only unforgivable sin. Through the eyes of the internet, the ultimate crime is being cringe.
In order to figure this out, we're going to have to answer 5 questions. Number 1, what does it actually mean? Number 2, what context is it being used as a buzzword? Number 3, is its use as a buzzword intended to represent its original definition or a new one entirely? Number 4, is the word being used correctly or is it bastardized? And finally, number 5, are there different words that can more accurately describe the same concept? And before we get started, I want to make it clear that contrary to popular belief, not all buzzwords are cringe. Some words are popular because they have a legitimate grip on society. A good example would be AI, but there are many others. Determining whether something is cringe or not is an inherently arbitrary and delicate process. What I'm mainly trying to distinguish with these 5 questions is whether or not this word causes me empathetic feelings of acute embarrassment or awkwardness for the people that use it unironically. In this context, I'm looking to see if this word is used by people who are trying to make a legitimate point, or instead it's really just a virtue signal for people that don't know how to use their own thoughts or ideas to convince somebody of something. So number 1, what does colonizer actually mean? To keep it simple, we're just gonna pull up the dictionary definition. According to Oxford Languages, colonizer's primary definition is a country that sends settlers to a place and establishes political control over it. And its secondary definition is a person who settles among and establishes political control over the indigenous people of an area. Well, that was quick. On to number 2. In what context is colonizer being used as a buzzword? This word is usually used to target people, but sometimes it's used under its primary definition to describe the actions of countries. Like I said in the beginning of this video, colonizer has been a leftist insult for decades, but the flaring Israel-Palestine conflict has made its usage skyrocket. The word is also thrown around outside of the context of the Israel-Palestine conflict, mostly at like random Jewish or white people, and oftentimes if you're American or British. The word is very powerful, and it carries a lot of history. Leftism has a tendency to recycle buzzwords that worked in different contexts of social justice. To me, the word colonizer is a vestigial word from the fight against apartheid in South Africa, which I think is pretty important to mention was really not all that long ago. You can see why South Africa has been so supportive of Palestine on the international stage, especially considering that in 1994, then President Nelson Mandela said, "But we know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians." Is this Mandela claiming that the plight of the Palestinians is identical to apartheid? Does this mean that just because calling a South African colonizer back during apartheid had merit, that it perfectly translates to the current situation in Palestine? The reason that I wanted to start this series was to highlight the idea that when you're engaging in a conversation about something important, what you say is likewise important. I believe that the key to finding common ground is by saying what you mean, meaning what you say, and being willing to admit when you're wrong. And when you're all out of facts to throw at the other person and instead are just relying on feelings, respectfully explain why you feel the way that you do, so maybe your friend or adversary might be able to understand you a little bit better. Nelson Mandela and other universally respected public speakers choose their words very wisely.
I do not understand what you mean. Perhaps if you clarify what you are referring to, I may be in a position to comment.
I think it's something that we should all aspire to. But regardless of the comparisons that Mandela made between South Africa and Palestine, we are living in a different time, and thus colonizer is being used in a different context. And in the same vein, just because Mandela was falsely labeled a terrorist at one point doesn't mean that actual terrorists should automatically be considered freedom fighters, which is sadly an argument that I've been hearing a lot, and is an argument that I countered in Hasan Piker's Twitch chat, just get instantly banned, which is a story that I will be telling you guys later. All right, on to number 3. Is colonizer's use as a buzzword intended to represent its original definition or a new one entirely? This may seem like an odd question, but I threw this one in here because I don't think that a word should be held to the same standard if it's purposely and openly being reappropriated. An example of a buzzword that uses a different definition would be something like goon, which, if you don't know what that means, maybe just save your retinas and don't look that up. Sometimes a word is so openly reappropriated that an alternative definition for it is added into the dictionary. I don't think that that's going to be happening with goon, but, maybe the Urban Dictionary. As for colonizer, though, it gets kind of complicated. The word is at least used under the guise of its original definition, but it also is used to describe the beneficiaries of both colonialism and settler colonialism. Colonialism is defined by Oxford Languages as the policy or practice of acquiring full or partial political control over another country, occupying it with settlers, and exploiting it economically. While settler colonialism is defined as a type of colonialism in which the indigenous people of a colonized region are displaced by settlers who permanently form a society there. Settler colonialism is a relatively new idea, only first being coined in the 1990s by historian Patrick Wolfe, while the term colonialism, on the other hand, has been used for centuries. Similar to how all bourbons are whiskeys, but not all whiskeys are bourbons, settler colonialism is a form of colonialism, but not all colonialism is settler colonialism, which is weird, because that doesn't really make sense at all, because settler colonialism and colonialism have completely different definitions. Instead of integrating and exploiting native populations, settler colonialism simply pushes them off of their land. And that's an important distinction, especially with how it relates to today's buzzword, because the word colonizer essentially denotes an executor of colonialism. However, it does not denote an executor of settler colonialism. And while it's a little bit cringe to start arbitrarily using the word colonizer in relation to settler colonialism, it gets worse. First, colonizer is not openly being reappropriated. And here, I'm actually giving leftists the benefit of the doubt that they're not using this term under its strict definition, because any educated person would only use this term in relation to settler colonialism. While many might enjoy the accusatory nature of colonizer's original definition, it doesn't make sense in almost any modern context. And secondly, it is absurdly cringe to consider every beneficiary of settler colonialism as a colonizer, because that would mean that every American other than Native Americans, which only make up about 1% of the United States population, would be considered a colonizer. That understanding of the word makes it highly arbitrary, and the more arbitrary something is, the more easily it's able to be thrown around as a buzzword. At this point, the word colonizer might as well just mean white person that I don't like. Whoa. Okay, again, sorry for the jump scare. But now that we have our foundation, let's get into the real analysis. But before that, just make sure to like, subscribe, comment. I mean, anything that makes the YouTube algorithm happy. And again, I'm sorry for the huge gap between uploads that I've had. I promise, like, I'm honestly doing YouTube full time now, as long as my health allows it. And I would love to become a YouTube partner as quickly as possible because I have so many ideas for how our members could gain value out of this channel. So if any of this resonates with you, I'd really appreciate it if you just shared it, I guess. I don't know, maybe you could like share it to a political Discord or maybe like a political subreddit. I don't know. That would probably help out a lot. Anyway, thank you so much for listening, and back to the show. Number 4, is colonizer being used fairly or is it bastardized? All right, just to warn you guys, this is going to be a very long conversation, almost universally about the Israel-Palestine conflict. And the reason for that is pretty simple. It's the reason why people are using this word so much. So let's start off with a question. If Israel is a colony, what country is it a colony for? Based off of the definition of colonizer and related words, it's pretty clear that a colony has to be a subsidiary of a specific country. And in this case, I shouldn't even use the word subsidiary. A colony has to be a colony of a specific country. Israel is not a colony of a singular country in any respect. Did some of the allied countries, particularly the United Kingdom, help bring Israel into existence after 6 million Jews were murdered in the Holocaust back in World War II? Well, yeah, they did. But that doesn't mean that Israel is a British colony, especially considering barely any British people moved to Israel. And yes, I know that many people argue that Israel is a proxy for Western ideals in the Middle East and cite that the British Palestine Mandate, which was the precursor to Israel's existence, was considered a colony by Britain themselves. But Israel is not the British Palestinian Mandate. That's like saying that the United States is a British colony. Checkmate, right? Well, not really. There are actually many times where the word colonizer kind of fairly describes what Israel has been doing. While Israel itself is not a colony, Israel has, let's just say, allowed the creation of illegal settlements, or what I am just going to call colonies, within Palestine. The problem with this distinction is that the Jewish people are native to Israel and have remained there for thousands of years, even during the diaspora. In the past, nativity would universally exclude a country from being considered a colonizer, but ever since the coining of the term settler colonialism, scholars have debated whether or not Israel fits that definition. Look, no matter what, land changes hands throughout history. But what's really important is making sure that the least amount of people are harmed by this transfer. And in a perfect world, maybe that transfer can be a net positive. But yeah, this was not the case for Israel's establishment. The Nakba was a pure ethnic cleansing. There was violence against civilians and widespread ransacking of homes. And while many argue that the Nakba is still ongoing, Israel is now a fully established country, for better or for worse, and is filled with millions of people that have no other home other than Israel. And it's important to mention that during the Nakba, Jews were also getting kicked out of other, Muslim countries that they were in. And that's on top of all of the Holocaust refugees that had lost everything that were also coming to Israel. And so it kind of complicates to the point that people's opinions are essentially just a combination of how far they want to zoom out on the conflict, and combined with their own personal biases. Because if you look at just what happened to Palestine, the Nakba was atrocious for the Arab population there. But if you zoom out and look at what was going on in the entire Arab world during that time period, the Nakba looks a lot more like a necessary evil for the Jewish people. With all that being said, the vast majority of Israel currently exists legally and within a geographical area where it is the beacon for human rights. And for anyone who fell for posts like these that wants to challenge me on Israel's commitment to human rights, just be honest with yourself. Would you rather wear a shirt with this graphic in Israel or in any surrounding Arab country, let alone Palestine. What it comes down to, though, is that no matter how you classify Israel, and no matter what wording you use, what Israel has been doing, or at least a lot of it, has been horrific.
The Gaza Health Ministry says an Israeli airstrike has hit a humanitarian zone. This happened in a tent city in southern Gaza. Israeli defense officials claim it was targeting a terrorist command and control center.
People flew, Ayad Mahdi told reporters. It's indescribable. Body parts. We had to dig our children out from under the sand. The target was inside Al-Mawasi camp, an 8-mile-long strip of beach-turned-tent city, now shelter for more than 500,000 Gazans.
We just don't need to use some accusatory catch-all buzzword to describe when something bad is happening. All right, so we've established that colonizer is used both incorrectly and unironically, which is pretty cringe. But in order to figure out just how cringe, we're going to need to loosen the definition to understand why people think that it fits in so many different contexts. Let's augment the definition a bit so that it says, a country or multiple countries that send settlers to a place and establishes political control over it. Initially, this seems like a fair alteration because it kind of looks like it might just be a technicality that the definition doesn't allow for multiple mother countries to have a single colony. Yet somehow every historical example of colonizers have all been from a singular mother country. England, Spain, France, the Dutch Republic, Portugal. And all of these countries perfectly fit the bill for colonialism. These countries established colonies in other nations, brought settlers from their own, economically exploited them, and then forced their cultural norms and languages upon them. But even when the English, French, and Dutch had colonies in what is now the northeastern US, they were adversaries. Not only did they not colonize together, they actually pretty much refused to trade with one another and instead would trade with the natives. You might be a little confused why I'm hammering this point so hard when I already hypothetically loosened colonizer's definition to supersede the historical precedent of needing to have a singular mother country to form a colony. I'm saying this because there's a precedent for a reason. History has proven it impossible for the other denotative facets of colonialism to exist without a singular mother country. What I mean by that is that it's logistically impossible for multiple countries to economically exploit and or force their languages and customs onto a specific area at the same time. Like, how could the English and French steal a bunch of stuff from the same natives, teach some of them how to eat cheese, some of them how to drink tea, while teaching them both English and French at the same time? It just won't work. These are the same dudes that would rather economically bolster the people that they're trying to subjugate, the natives, by trading with them instead of with each other. Do you really think that they could form a functioning colony together?
Well, Yardo, you only gave us one example.
All right, I'll give you another example. How about St. Martin? It's an island in the Caribbean that I've actually been lucky enough to visit myself. It is famous for two main things. One is its absurd airport that you can get the closest to landing planes legally of anywhere in the world. And then also because even though it's only 1.6 times bigger than Manhattan geographically, and has only around 70,000 residents, the French and the Dutch still had to split it into two colonies. And this is how it remains to this day. Well, technically they're autonomous states, which is just pretty much a gentrified way of saying colony. The island itself is anglicized as Saint Martin, while the French side is known as Saint Martin, and the Dutch side is known as Saint Martin. Come on, folks.
Come on, folks.
These colonizers literally used 3 different words for the exact same name of the exact same place just so it could be in their own language. Also, this is during the modern era when Dutch and French relationships have been heavily normalized compared to when we think of colonization taking place. And I'll throw in some more examples just for good measure. Then there's the second biggest island in the Caribbean, Hispaniola, which the French and the Spanish split up into Haiti and the Dominican Republic, respectively. And then we also have South Africa, and all that happened between the English and the Dutch there. There are just so many examples of this happening, and none of them are ever going to involve multiple mother countries making a colony, let alone an entire League of Nations, which is what happened with the creation of Israel.
But Yardo, those are just all anecdotes.
My brethren, history is just a conglomeration of anecdotes, and when some of these anecdotes start happening in the same way repeatedly, then we make words about them. Words like colonization and words like colonizer. So even if we broaden colonizer's definition to include multiple mother countries for a single colony, and even if the Jewish people that returned to Israel were acting as representatives for their previous countries, countries that treated them oh so well, like Germany and Poland and Russia and Iran, there's still no way that they could colonize anything together. There would be too many conflicting interests. Yet somehow Jews were still able to resettle in Israel. What Hamas sympathizers don't seem to understand is you can't have it both ways. You can't say that Israel is a colonial state and that Jews are just representatives of different European imperialist countries, because that wouldn't be a colony. But if you admit that Jews acted as a uniform group, similar to a country that technically could colonize, that brought their own language and customs and religion back to their ancestral homeland of Israel, then you can't in good conscience tell them to go back to the countries that they were fleeing. Wow. It's almost like the Jewish culture kept them together for thousands of years, and they only intermingled with other cultures to stay alive and to avoid persecution. It's almost like it's messed up to tell a random Israeli to go back to Europe, the same place where less than 80 years ago their families were systematically murdered because of who they were. It's almost like most Israelis have nowhere else to go, especially at this point, including Sephardic Jews, because Arabs control 99% of the landmass from North Africa and the Middle East because of hundreds of years of conquest. Conquest, well, I could call it colonization, but I won't stoop down to that level.
But actually, Gazans also have nowhere to go. They're stuck in Gaza because of the blockade.
Well, finally some common sense. Yes, they are stuck in Gaza, but let's look at Egypt's border compared to Israel's with Gaza. Oh, well, looks like it's pretty much the same. Interestingly enough, the border is right in Rafah, which is where all the refugees, for the most part, in the Gazan war are right now. And Egypt, you would think they could just open the border, right? I mean, why wouldn't they? These are members of their own ethnicity. They care about them. At least they say they do. Well, let's have Chris Livesay from CBS News explain why.
Hey, this is Chris Livesay in Cairo, Egypt. Country that has a very sticky situation on its hands because it's the only country besides Israel that shares a border with Gaza, an area with lots of people who would love to come into this country right now to flee the violence, but Egypt won't open the border. Why won't it do that? A number of reasons. Among them, it's worried that among those peaceful civilians, there could be some Hamas or terrorist elements there that would come into Egypt and stir up trouble here, but could also launch attacks on Israel, and that could welcome a return attack on Egyptian territory. So this problem that's localized in Israel and the Gaza Strip right now could explode into an even bigger conflict in the region.
What? Egypt is worried about terrorists coming from the most densely terroristic population in the entire world? That is insane. According to the Palestinian Center for Policy, Survey, and Research, 52% of Gazans and 85% of West Bank respondents, or 72% of Palestinian respondents overall, voiced satisfaction with the role of Hamas in the war. Which is odd, because the West Bank is known for being far more liberal, and I'm using this term liberally here, than Gaza is. My belief is that less Gazans support Hamas than people in the West Bank because they're the ones suffering the consequences of Hamas's actions. But that doesn't mean that their views are any less anti-Semitic than those in the West Bank. But anyway, these numbers that come directly from Palestine say that at least the majority of Palestinians are at least supportive of terrorism. Future Yardo here. I got some good news and I got some bad news. A new poll, dubbed Poll 93, from the same intra-Palestine polling group that I mentioned before, found that the majority of Palestinians in the West Bank still support the October 7th attacks. But now only 39% of Gazans do, which luckily makes it a minority. So it sounds like I was right on the money about Gazans souring on Hamas after living through the repercussions of their actions. And these numbers are great news, because 39% is probably less than the percentage of American leftists that supported the October 7th murder of nearly 1,400 civilians. And I guess I hope I'm joking about that, but I feel like I'm not. And I honestly don't know. More on that topic in a bit. But now for the bad news. The most confusing part about all of this is that the PCPSR then claims that nearly 90% of Palestinians believe that the October 7th attack only targeted military personnel and that the videos of Hamas murdering citizens were fake, which is like actually insane. Throughout all of my research on this topic, this is by far the most surprising thing that I have ever read. There's just so much to unpack here. And while I honestly could make a whole video like theory crafting, how this number even came to be like 90%, that's like 90% of German people being Holocaust deniers. And I would love to hear your opinions on this in the comments, because this is truly like one of the most insane things I've ever heard. But like, yeah, let's try to dissect it. So first off, it's very odd that this information wasn't more widely reported. I had to find this from reading the PCPSR's archives directly from their website instead of just seeing it on some sort of article, right? I also did see, like, once I started doing more research on this, I saw somebody like commented on Reddit. But like, this is still like very obscure stuff, right? Like, most people don't know this number. I assume that the number is true because I have no reason to believe that they would lie. They have a lot of like information that looks bad for Palestinians, so I wouldn't expect them to lie about this. But assuming that it's true, how do we reach that number? Obviously, some people believe that October 7th was a hoax, right? I mean, that's what the number describes. But I also do think that some people, you know, are just lying about it not being a thing just so that they can cope with their people doing something so horrible. And then I know that a lot of the people in Palestine are Hamas operatives, so they're going to lie about it as well. And the thing is, I have no idea the proportions on this. But honestly, if I had to take a guess, I would assume that it's mostly people that live in Palestine that legitimately do not believe that those videos are real, or, you know, they have never seen those videos and they just could never imagine Hamas doing such a thing, which is just so fucking tragic. It seems that we like heavily underestimated the level of brainwashing that these poor fucking Palestinians have endured from Hamas. And also, there's just so much irony and absurdity in the fact that many leftists here in America vehemently defend Hamas, knowing full well the atrocities they've committed. While in Gaza, only 39% of them support Hamas, and almost all of them, like around 90% of them, don't even know about the atrocities that Hamas committed. Just imagine how low that approval percentage of Palestinians towards Hamas would be if they understood and knew how fucked up Hamas was. And yeah, the craziest part is that if we do take these numbers at face value, American leftists are statistically more extreme than the Palestinian people about the Palestinian conflict, or what they call the Palestinian genocide, right? But it's just so fucking horrible. Like, thinking that these people have no idea, like the vast majority of, if we take these numbers at face value, they have no idea why they're being bombed. Of course, they're going to be so susceptible of radicalization. Anyway, it just really shows how devastating the stifling of information transfer can be in so many different ways. But in this situation, it's just so detrimental. Anyway, I apologize for destroying the whole flow of this video, but I really felt like I had to talk about this. So anyway, back to the past. I live in San Diego, which is 13 miles from Tijuana, which is the second biggest city proper in Mexico. If the cartel came across the border and murdered 1,400 San Diegans and took 150 of us hostage, and then a poll was taken from the Mexican authorities that showed that the vast majority of their people were supportive of that attack, I can imagine how it would be very difficult for me not to want a scorched earth response in order to get those hostages back. But that doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do. Doing this results in even more of this.
خلف هؤلاء الشهداء 3 من الأبناء سيفجرون رأسك يا ابن الكلب. ربنا يرحمهم شهداءنا. نحن أبطال. نحن غزة. أين أنت ودول العربية؟ حماك الله يا غزة. علمت كل دول العالم الرجولة. ايش هالقد؟ هيك دايرة. العالم كله مش قدر لها. عشاننا أبطال. ام شهيدة ربنا يرحمها، خواتي شهداء ربنا يرحمهم، لكن حتنادي لايام وحتصور انت وانا داش على رقابهم هيك شوف.
Now, I'm no military expert. I don't know how difficult Hamas has made it to reach those hostages, and I bet they have made it extremely difficult for a special forces extraction. And I bet that, you know, a lot of the bombings and round raids Israel's been doing has been to make that extraction less dangerous. But what I do know is that the civilian death toll from these strategies, even if that number is coming from an admittedly untrustworthy source, is inexcusable. I know that Netanyahu's government doesn't have its people or the Palestinians' best interests at heart. I know that Egypt could have saved thousands of lives already if it had opened its border. But let's just get back to the social aspect of all of this. The most ironic part of all of this is the sheer number of westernized liberal Muslim and Arabs that go around chanting, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," advocating for the same type of extremist government that their families actively fled to envelop the only westernized nation in the Middle East. You know, the same type of government that explicitly excludes spouses from being able to be considered victims of rape. A government that actively shames and even promotes violence towards LGBTQ communities. You know, the same type of government that says that the only answer is jihad, or that all Jews should be killed. Hamas changed Jews to Zionist in their charter in 2017 for optics, but now leftists have pretty much turned the word Zionist into a slur, which I could make an entire video on. Leftists like to say, "Oh, I don't hate Jewish people, I just hate Zionists," while they protest alongside these people and somehow have convinced themselves that they're on the right side. Newsflash, 80% of Jews are Zionists, and around 50% of all Jews live in Israel. Being a Zionist literally just means that you believe in Israel's right to exist. At this point, Zionism has nothing to do with the creation of Israel. It's already been created. And being a Zionist doesn't mean that you support the immoral and illegal expansion of Israel. It just means that you don't think that the Jewish people's native homeland should be wiped off of the face of the earth by Arabs that already control the entirety of the Middle East and North Africa. Saying that you hate Zionists is pretty much like saying that you hate Muslims, except it's socially acceptable. There's a way to criticize Western countries like Israel or the US without calling for their dissolution, especially when that dissolution would be replaced by unadulterated hatred. And the most ironic part about all this, again, is that these people are only able to express their extremist views because they're in a Western country. And while leftists love to share their controversial opinions, they don't seem to like it when people respond to them. And as you might assume, anytime I reach out to someone who reposts some horribly misrepresentative thing about, quote, Zionists and, quote, colonization, and, you know, I ask them why they believe what they believe, they just straight up don't respond to me and unfollow me or block me sometimes. And I was banned from Hasan's chat for saying, and sorry, I actually can't give it to you verbatim because when I clicked on it, Twitch just wouldn't show me what I said, but I think I remember it pretty well. But there's a difference between murderous zealots and the people who fought against apartheid in South Africa. So I typed this when Hasan was defending Hamas for fighting against apartheid. And when I appealed the ban, the response that I got was, "I hope one day you realize how racist you are." That's right, folks. It is racist to think that the race of Hamas is exactly what they claim that they are in their charter.
is there a role of empathy for the other side when you have a certain amount of biases, someone with the opposite biases as you? Is there a role of empathizing with that side?
Yeah, 100%. I believe that every single person is on a journey, is on their own journey of education, rehabilitation, self-reflection. And I have had different opinions in the past on certain matters that I have grown out of. And I think that it's totally valid, totally normal to have certain things that you look back at in the past that you would consider now to be bigoted, right?
Yeah, dog. You're all for rehabilitation, but will ban somebody from your chat for the crime of having common sense and not just believing every single thing that you say. And flash forward to the future, just one more time. So yeah, I'm going to be remaining fat for the rest of this video, and sadly, probably for at least a few months if I don't get my act together. But yeah, so it's March 4th, 2025. And since all of this was written, recorded, or whatever, I've now seen Ethan Klein's content nuke of Hasan Piker. So I now realize that it was probably this creature that banned me.
First, let me introduce you to Frogan.
Why don't you go take a trip to Home Depot and buy some rope?
She's one of Hasan's main moderators. She's leading great discourse like Ethan's Islamophobic for saying, don't kill civilians. She has zero talent. She has 100 concurrent viewers, but somehow she's always on the homepage. She's winning awards. Nobody's watching her. Nobody cares. Why is she relevant? We don't know. It's important for me to show you guys what an actual horrible person Frogan is so that you can see who Twitch is elevating. So let's start with this clip. Ludwig, a large streamer on Twitch, donated $10,000 to the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund. That's a wonderful thing to do, right? No, not good enough for Frogan.
I find ultimately, like, if I were to do a charity thing where the charity thing relies on your donations, it should be something where like 95% of people feel good and are down for it. And like ultimately, regardless of what you think, that is not the situation here. So I personally donated 10K. Because I think it is worthwhile. And if you guys got some extra bread, I would recommend you donate. But I won't throw it on you. You know what I mean? No thanks. And some people are going to say that. You know what I mean? That's why it's the difference.
This is a cracker take.
Difference between like, hey, I can put my money where my mouth is, but I don't need to put your money there. I don't need to enter a fucking debate about whether that's worthwhile.
I know Arabs are dying, but you know, I'm not going to tell you to donate. Do whatever you want. Me, I donated $10,000, but I'm not going to promote it. Just don't say you donated $10,000 then. Look, if you're not actively believing, if you don't believe in the cause, and if you're not against genocide at this point, like, keep your fucking money. Keep your $10,000. Keep your little chump change. Like, what do you want? Do you want me to say like congratulations?
Imagine being Frogan, a leftist living in LA in comfort, begging for her rent money on stream, and telling displaced and famished Palestinian children, no kids, you need to give that $10,000 back. Ludwig didn't pass my purity test.
Keep your fucking money.
But wait, there's more.
No pity at all for any fucking soldiers. Distress, thank you so much. I will never have any fucking pity for any fucking soldiers. U.S. military? Who fucking who? I hope you get PTSD. Oh my God, I want my fucking Camaro, no student loans. Fuck you. I hope you get PTSD. And I hope you get no health insurance when you get back into fucking America.
Yeah, and I don't know. To be fair to Hasan, like, he does generally have some pretty good takes on U.S. domestic policy. Like, he does a good job of pointing out the blatant flaws with both of our political parties. But I bring up all of this just to show how leftist circles are so willing to be exclusionary, and to show how they're so willing to denigrate the meaning of powerful words like racist, you know, or like colonizer, to the point that they essentially just mean nothing, or to the point that they mean far less than they used to, like the word genocide, which is a topic I will explore in another video. Whew. Now, all of that is just what I believe. I have my biases just like anyone else does. And I also have many friends that live in Israel, including my friend Amit, who is a Persian Jewish man who has never even stepped foot in a country outside of Israel in his entire life and has absolutely no way of returning to Iran. Honestly, the fact that I even have to preface this tragedy with all of this bullshit identity politics just goes to show you how backwards and anti-Semitic this conversation has become. But anyway, Amit was at the Nova Music Festival massacre on October 7th, 2023. He escaped with his life, but his best friend Adir and his wife Shiraz, who he was separated from, did not.
And you know her personally?
Yes. This is Shiraz and Adir, married couple, my best friends, really. They meant the world for me, for real. Like, they were my asylum, they were my escape place, they were my psychologists, they were everything to me. And they were the parents of my daughter's best friends. So they were also like, the children are now with Shiraz's older sister.
They were hiding in a bunker outside of Kibbutz Mifalsim when they were murdered by Hamas terrorists, leaving behind 2 young girls. After their murders, their killer used Shiraz's phone to call his dad and brag about what he had done. Apologies for the poor English translations, but here's some of that phone call.
أنا قاعد أكلمك من جوبا بسيم. افتح الواتس تبعه قول له وين شوف كيف القتلة شوف كيف قتلك بيدي يابا ابنك قتل يهود هاي دخل بسيم يابا الله أكبر ربنا يحميك يا رب ربنا يحميك يابا ربنا يحميك يابا قاعد أكلمك من جوال يهودية قتلتها وقتلت جوزها الله أكبر الله أكبر ولله الحمد الله أكبر ولله الحمد يابا افتح الواتس شوف كيف قتلت يابا افتح بتدفع عليك واتس قول له وين بروح ربنا يوفقك بالسلامة يابا جوبا بسيم يابا يابا والله 10 قتلت 10 بيدي يابا يابا على ايدي اعطينا امي
I'll make sure to link Amit's full story in the description. But yeah, imagine you're an Israeli person or even somebody that knew somebody that, like even me, I'm not even an Israeli, and I knew somebody who was affected by this. Imagine you're those 2 girls whose parents were murdered, and you see within 24 hours this posted to Instagram. And I know that I've already shown you guys a lot of deranged leftist content in this video that I've mostly just sped past. And while I do implore you to maybe go back and, I don't know, pause it and read some of what I had like kind of skimmed over there and like what those posts and photos had in them, this is one that I really need to go over. So let me go look at that right here, right now. So no, your eyes do not deceive you. This is an infographic that was posted on October 8th, 2023 by an account called Woke Scientist. Cringe. Sadly, I actually have 3 friends that follow this account, so it's not like as cringe or as fringe as you might think. It definitely is as cringe as you might think. But yeah, this infographic is a visualization of the motorized paragliders that Hamas used to get over the Gaza border and kill around 1,400 innocent people. And again, this was posted on October 3rd, 2023, within 24 hours of the massacre. So there was no retaliatory attacks, none of the atrocities that the Netanyahu regime had committed on the Palestinian people. None of that had happened yet. Obviously, people are going to complain about the consistent oppression that that the West Bank and Gaza has endured, and I understand that, but none of this should ever be considered whatsoever in the face of a tragedy like this. Completely disrespectful, inhumane, and despicable. Simply despicable. The fact that I really shouldn't have to explain to anybody why this is one of the most fucked up things I've ever seen, but here we go. This is a legitimate representation of what a lot of leftists believe. They believe that Hamas, that they're freedom fighters. I mean, I got banned for saying that they weren't. But yeah, Woke Scientist is a pretty good case study for just how deranged and isolated the leftist bubble can become, right? And honestly, it's pretty sad how common anti-Semitism is, and, you know, combined with hate for, quote, globalists, right, is on both extremes of the political spectrum. I mean, I feel like the horseshoe theory has really never been more valid than it is today. But anyway, no matter how absurd I find this to be, you know, it doesn't surprise me that some people have a completely alternative take than I do. I think it's disgusting, and I'm trying to do my best to try to convince you that it's disgusting. But the great thing about complex situations is that you're allowed to care about certain aspects of them more than others and form your own opinion. This is a notion that's being threatened by the absolutism that extremists demand, definitely on both sides of the aisle. They use buzzwords like here with decolonization to simplify complex situations into pure good versus evil scenarios, effectively ending the conversation before it even happens. And due to the subsequent stifled information sharing, we end up with people like this.
Let's see how much students actually know what they stand for. If you get them right, you win $100. First question, have you guys chanted from the river to the sea?
Yes.
Okay, which river, which sea?
The Sea of...
So you don't know the okay. No. The answer was the Mediterranean and the Jordan. What does Hamas say their #1 goal is according to their charter?
They just wanted to free Palestine.
To murder all Jews around the world. How many years did Israel occupy Gaza?
Late 1800s, the entire time.
Since 48.
It was actually under Egyptian control for the first 20 or so years, and then Israel actually left Gaza in 2006.
I'm shocked. Wait, they left?
What is the definition of Zionism?
Doesn't that mean you hate Palestinians, right?
Jewish people who think that Judaism is the highest race.
Zionism actually just means that you think Jews are entitled to having their own homeland to protect themselves from another Holocaust. You don't even have to be Jewish. That makes you a Zionist.
Okay.
What does Antifada revolution mean?
I don't know what that means.
But you've chanted it?
Yeah.
It's like a global call to murder Jews.
Wow. Wow.
Did you know you said that?
No.
Would you say it again?
Probably not.
How much have our foreign adversaries donated to American universities in the last decade?
No idea.
I couldn't give you a number on that.
The answer was over $6 billion. How many Gazan refugees have the Arab neighboring countries let in the last few months?
35,000.
The answer was 0.
Okay, I know that was a big sidetrack, but let's get back to today's buzzword, colonizer. Like I said, everything that I just said was my opinion, so here's an example of a possible rebuttal. As aforementioned, the word colonizer is subsequently being reappropriated to include the relatively new study of settler colonialism. In settler colonialism, the likelihood of people from a variety of countries being able to come together under a uniform culture to take over lands for themselves is far more likely than in standard colonialism, where integration and economic exploitation of the native population is the most important thing. And history has proved this, as the primary examples of settler colonial states are places with cosmopolitan populations like the United States, Canada, and Australia. By this definition, Israel seems like it could fit as a settler colonial state, and thus, at least in a loose form of its definition, a, quote, colonizer, with its people likewise being colonizers. So why do I disagree with this rebuttal? Well, there are many reasons, but I'm going to avoid the low-hanging fruits, and at least I'll try to, and I'll give you an analogy. I'm not a big Marvel guy, at least not anymore. I used to love all their movies, especially the OG Iron Man, Guardians of the Galaxy, and like the Marvel TV shows like Daredevil and Jessica Jones. But then the storyline eventually just got so convoluted when they started introducing all the multiverse stuff. You know, so many things happening at once, it not all really making sense. I mean, the new Deadpool movie has Wolverine in it, even though Wolverine supposedly died like a decade ago. Anyway, likewise, I used to think that the word colonialism had merit, you know? It described a time period in American history. It explained why so many countries around the world use European languages. It explained why people of European descent tended to have an advantage in life. But now, leftists have created a sort of colonialism multiverse, so to speak. Ever since they've started hyper-focusing on the idea of settler colonialism, which broadened what colonialism could be to an absurd extent, every definition of all of the different colonial-esque words have arbitrarily changed to fit that narrative. Look, if they can make up words, I can too. Colonial-esque is pretty fuego, and you know it. Anyway, look, The term settler colonialism is just stupid. It makes no sense. It's just a virtue signal, and I'll prove it. Let's look at the etymology. The root of all of these words is colony, and a colony is defined as a country or area under the full or partial political control of another country, typically a distant one, and occupied by settlers from that country. And the secondary definition is a group of people of one nationality or ethnic group living in a foreign city or country. That one is more non-applicable. Like, that's kind of just a whole different thing that we're not talking about. But either way, in what way is settler colonialism related to a colony? It's not. So settler colonialism is supposed to be a form of colonialism, and colonialism is the proliferation of colonies. But settler colonialism doesn't involve colonies at all. And all of the famous purported perpetrators of, quote, settler colonialism themselves aren't colonies. To me, the term settler colonialism was used to poison the well. Instead of using terminology that made etymological sense, settler colonialism was coined to make accusatory words like colonizer applicable to more people, and words like decolonization applicable to places like US or Israel, when previously it was only applicable to places like Haiti or Sierra Leone. And all of this is not to say that you shouldn't reappropriate words in pursuit of social justice or in pursuit of anything generally. Like, for example, intersectional is a buzzword that has gained denotative legitimacy by having its alternative definition written into Oxford Languages and other dictionaries. But do you see the difference here? Intersectional is originally a geometry term. With minimal context clues, it should be pretty obvious if you're talking about a pair of intersecting lines or you're talking about the plight of being a black lesbian. But when you coin a new term that is in the exact same category as words that already work together, under the guise that, you know, the one we're talking about right now, settler colonialism too will work with them, but then they don't, that's when a problem arises and buzzwords form. Bastardizing a group of veteran words to include a niche definition of a recently coined term is extremely cringe. And the flagrant misuse of these words has become a rite of passage of sorts to enter leftist circles, which not only repels people from wanting to join a cause that has many positives, but makes normal liberals look cringe to the other side of the aisle as well. Buzzwords are carcinogenic, and performative activism is a cancer. And many of these same performers are abstaining from doing the one thing they actually can do, which is vote. Oh, genocide Joe, blah, blah, blah. When Trump has said that Biden should have let Israel, quote, finish the job in front of the whole country.
You got to ask them, as far as Israel and Hamas, Israel's the one that wants to go. He said the only one that wants to keep going is Hamas. Actually, Israel is the one, and you should let him go and let him finish the job. He doesn't want to do it. He's become like a Palestinian, but they don't like him because he's a very bad Palestinian. He's a weak one.
And clearly, I had written that like 7 months ago when Biden was still running and the election hadn't concluded, but look what happened. Those people, a lot of whom were leftist in swing states like Michigan, which has a huge Muslim population, that just straight up refused to vote because they believe that, or at least claim that, people should think that both sides are equally bad. Classic false equivalency. Now we have Donald Trump as the president of the United States, and he wants to turn Gaza into a resort town, a Riviera for Americans and Israelis.
Donald is coming to set you free, bringing the light for all to see. No more tunnels, no more fear. Trump Gaza is finally here. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new light. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza #1. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new light. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza #1.
But before Trump dropped this beautiful AI video, he said this.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it too. We'll own it.
And right after, Hasan Piker responded with this.
And she absolutely in a million years would not have decided to absorb Gaza as an American territory. If Hasan suggests that she would have done that, I'm going to lose my mind. I'm going to have an aneurysm.
Regardless of the hypothetical reality where Kamala Harris would not be as bad as Donald Trump, which we have no proof for.
Wow, Hasan really wanted to own the libs so badly that he now has to lie to himself and his audience, since he realizes all the false equivalencies he made legitimately helped Trump get elected, which looks like it's likely to end in the complete ethnic cleansing of Gaza. Wow, you really helped your case, didn't you, man? And where were these leftists when Persians took the streets of every major Western city 2 years ago after a woman was murdered by the Iranian government for not wearing proper headwear? Pretty much nowhere to be found. So interesting. Westernized Persian people also tend to be Zionists. It's almost like they see what the proliferation of Islamic extremism can do to a people, and they take Hamas's threat seriously. It's almost like they wish Iran was more like Israel instead of an oppressive Hamas-adjacent regime, so that they could actually go and visit their families in Iran. And I know that was a lot, but I hope that it was at least a little bit digestible, no matter what level of knowledge you have on the history of the Israel-Palestine conflict. But before we get into number 5 and talk about word alternatives, which, yeah, we're still on number 4, like literally 80% of the video is number 4. Sorry about that. But yeah, I just wanted to address the other modern contexts that colonizer is used, while also focusing on when it is strategically not used. At this point, the Free Palestine movement has overridden pretty much every other leftist cause, so Israel tends to be lumped into colonizers' use. But as mentioned before, as long as you're white or Jewish, you'd be considered a colonizer to many people at least. Of course, this just isn't true. Unless you are actively colonizing, you are not a colonizer. At least that's what I have come to my conclusion after this research and looking at that etymology and everything that we've talked about for the last hour.
But Yardo, what if you're the descendant of colonizers and profit off of the land that the natives had stolen from them by your ancestors?
Well, if we bastardize the definition to that degree, then why are we only focusing on white people and Israelis and Jews? Why don't we talk about the colonization of the entire Middle East and North Africa by the Islamic Arabs? Since this conquest, the native Berbers, Chaldeans, Assyrians, Kurds, and countless other ethnicities are only a shell of their former selves. And if you don't know much about the Middle East, you probably have never even heard of any of these people. You could also throw in the Turks, if you really wanted to, even though they're not Arab. They're still Arab-adjacent Muslim colonizers. Hell, even a large portion of Israeli, quote, Arabs have been genetically proven to be ethnically Jewish. Apparently their ancestors had converted to Islam generations ago in order to feel safe remaining in their homeland. I mean, why don't we talk about Japan's colonization of Southeast Asia? Well, this omission is probably because of the well-documented leftist to weeb pipeline. But all jokes aside, leftist extremisms that act like white people are the only people that are capable of racism or colonialism are just wrong. Racism and colonialism has existed for centuries throughout the globe. And if you want to bastardize the word to call a white American a colonizer, you better be calling every Japanese person a colonizer as well. And honestly, I wrote this like 7 months ago, and if we actually do colonize Gaza, we are colonizers. So, crazy stuff happening in this world, huh? Whew. Finally, I think we're done with number 4. So, in conclusion, yes, the use of colonizer is bastardized.
But Yardo, how can we call out Israel if we don't call it a colonizer?
Number 5, are there any words that could more accurately describe the same concept? Definitely. Hopefully, no matter your position or level of expertise on the Israel-Palestine conflict, you can see that not only is the conflict complicated, but the way that we communicate about the topic is likewise complicated. Every part of the story, every atrocity committed, every mistake made, every cultural difference, all these things can't be conversed about with all of your diction dripping with disdain. With a topic so sensitive and complex, your words matter to those around you. So while there aren't going to be any easy substitute for bastardized words that only aim to simplify and divide us, that's a good thing. But for the sake of this video, I'll try my best to think of some colonizer substitutes. Maybe instead of calling a white person who disagrees with your worldview a colonizer, maybe just say they have white privilege. Well, that is still pretty cringe and accusatory. Maybe just respond with a real rebuttal instead. I mean, the word, quote, colonist is a better substitute since it acts as the action of colonization from the definition and instead focuses on simply existing within a colony. But still, it just doesn't make any sense because there are barely any colonies left in the world. Colonizer's primary definition relating to the actions of countries is easier to substitute though. So instead of generally incorrectly saying that Israel is a colonizer, maybe say that it is a hyper-militaristic country that subjugates its neighbors and uses excessive force that results in the deaths of thousands of innocent Palestinians. Maybe say that Israel's far-right government has had every ability to protect its people from the attack on October 7th, but somehow either chose not to or failed to, even though they have the best spies in the world, and Gaza is the place that they keep under the tightest surveillance. Maybe call out Israel's government for continuous reports of Ashkenazi or white Jews treated preferentially to brown Sephardic Jews and Israeli Arabs. Or maybe mention that Israel has implemented policies that are eerily similar to apartheid, and then back all of those claims up. There are so many valid criticisms for Israel, and a buzzword just doesn't cut it. Anyway, plugging colonizer into the cringe meter on a scale from Giga Chad Sam Harris to two-time Twitch Rising Star Award-winning Frogan, I'll give this one a Jojo Siwa. All right. Thank you everyone for watching. I really appreciate that you watched this whole thing. Truly, from the bottom of my heart, been going through a lot of rough times with my health recently, so it just means a lot for you to watch this. And make sure to share this video with anyone and everyone. I'm going to be doing YouTube full time for the foreseeable future, so there will be a lot more episodes of this series and a whole bunch of other stuff. So make sure to subscribe. This is likely going to be the longest episode we'll ever do because I wanted to get the heaviest stuff out of the way. So just remember, say what you mean and mean what you say. And if you don't know what it means, then don't say it. And stop calling people colonizers, you little weirdos. Anyway, Yardo out.